Hello everyone, John Pidgeon here. Welcome back to This is Property. Today I'm joined by someone who steered some of the biggest real estate operations in the country, Rachelle. Geoff Lucas, the former CEO of McGrath Estate Agents, former CEO and Managing Director of the agency, and now the founder of GPL Advisory, where he works with businesses on leadership, governance and strategic performance. He's seen real estate from every angle, so much so that I've actually written a script out for me to start this show with. So we're diving deep into leadership, market behaviour. He's an expert in real estate from all angles, and we'll get a view on where the industry is heading from his point of view. So looking forward to getting into this. Let's do it.
So, Geoff, we know you as someone that's been in the real estate industry, but where did your journey start before real estate got its hooks in you?
Yeah, thanks for having us, Rach and John. I guess full disclosure, I'm an accountant by trade, so to put that on the table right from the outset, but I haven't done that for a long time. So that was kind of my background, and I thought that was terrific because it gave me the ability to understand balance sheets and financials, from which I then got into leadership roles, etc. Because I think it's pretty difficult to do that and make decisions for companies and groups of stakeholders if you don't have a basic grasp of financial information. So pretty quickly after that, I started to get into leadership of organisations, basically around founder-driven businesses, growth businesses. So I'm a growth-focused person. And I guess throughout my career, I've been working in 7 different industries. A lot of people think that I'm always from the property industry because I've been there for some 15 years now. But I've been across 7 different industries, being travel and tourism, computer software, Australian wine industry, the energy sector, financial services. So a broad background, I guess a generalist, but always with a focus on working with founders of rapidly growing businesses and founders who have a product or a service that they are expert in and they've grown to a level, and then they want to take the business to the next level. So that's a quick part of the history of my background.
Yeah, wow.
So I suppose one of your big breaks was when you became COO of McGrath Real Estate, everyone commonly knows around the country, and then you, I'd call it an upgrade to CEO. How was that shift going from Chief Operations Officer to CEO?
Yeah, interesting. Well, that was an incredible entree into a wonderful industry. And that was after I had led a business by the name of Credit Corp in the financial services industry as CEO to a public listing and rapid growth into an ASX 300 company. So then I got the opportunity to meet a guy called John McGrath, who we all know as, one of the gurus of residential property in Australia. And that role really was with him leading that business and taking charge of the leadership team there and figuring out a strategy and then going down and executing that. John being the front person, as he is, the expert in the transaction, and myself with those corporate skills and also leadership skills to put together a leadership team to go and achieve those strategic objectives. So, COO, CEO were kind of interchangeable. That was a leadership role. It was a challenge initially because I was stepping into a brand new industry. Had bought and sold properties before, but never really worked in the industry. So a big challenge to immerse yourself quickly into that business, that industry, so that you could quickly equip yourself to make decisions on the fly and grow that business with John and the team.
Yeah, and you certainly did grow that business, didn't you?
I think I walked in there, we had 9 or 10 offices and perhaps about 130 people. Fast forward 8 years just after the IPO, and we were some 85 offices with about 1,500 or 1,600 people. It was a wonderful business to work from to then scale it.
That is phenomenal. So where did you go from McGrath?
So we did. We took 8 years to build that and then IPO that business, and that was. It took a little longer than we had planned, as often is the case when you set out a strategic plan. Following that, I went off took a breather from the real estate industry and I actually went to a business by the name of Sonoma, which you may be familiar with, food business.
I love croissants, absolutely.
Bakery. Yeah. And that in itself was a problem, right? Over the 2.5 years I was there, I think I put on about 10 kilograms. I had to get out of there. But another founder-driven business and a sector I hadn't worked in. So I took that breather. The business changed after the IPO at McGrath, some new constitution of the board, etc., and it went down a different tack. John and I then got together and said, hey, do we want to go and revisit that? So I went back for another stint of about 3 years after that. And then started to regrow that business as well. So I had a little bit of a hiatus in a different business and then back into real estate with McGrath for a period of 3 years.
And that then led you to the agency? You got headhunted to take over?
Yeah, the agency's interesting. That was fascinating because a number of people, when I left McGrath the first time, a number of people in the business also left and wanted to pursue their own thing, and quite a number of them ended up at a business that they called the agency and started to grow that. And that embraced a little bit of a different model. So McGrath was really a hybrid between franchising and company-owned stores, if you like. And we were always kind of calibrating that growth. The agency was a different model and a more, I guess, contemporary model, saying that real estate's not done from corner stores so much. It's done in living rooms and digitally, etc., and the people can be based in large, functionally appropriate hubs, if you like, not necessarily street corner offices that cost a lot of capital to build because people aren't coming in those offices to transact. So that was the agency model.
Yeah.
I still remember the slogan. What was it? Brands don't sell real estate. People sell real estate,
do, yeah.
And I just remember that.
Was that the agency's
It was the agency,
motto?
and I remember it was everywhere.
Yeah, brands don't sell homes, people do. Yeah. And they were, I guess, seen at that time as a disruptor, and I was quite passionate about that, about quite an archaic industry that hadn't really changed very much, embracing a different way. And so that was what was attractive there. There was also some terrific people there that I got to rekindle that working and professional relationship with. And it was also, or it is also, a national business. And so, incorporating that great state of WA and really national. So they were doing about, when I left there, about $6.5–7 billion in sales. Right. So it also encompasses so many different markets, and we'll talk a little bit later, I'm sure, about markets within markets. And that's an interesting environment to work in as well, because when one's rising, another might be falling.
Which is probably good from a national model, isn't it, when you don't have to rely on one particular market? For a business, you're not susceptible to a market cycle so much, so there's a little bit of risk mitigation there as well. So if you took McGrath, your experience there, and then the agency, and put it into 2026, and you were starting your own real estate firm, what bits and pieces would you take and apply? Would it be a franchise model? Would it be a corner store model? What would you run with? Perhaps bits and pieces from each. There are some very successful franchises in the Australian residential property sector. People probably look at me and think I'm anti-franchise. Absolutely not. That was just a model that we were operating at that point. Some of the larger franchises, like Ray White, for example, the real leader of the industry there, they do a wonderful job, and it's a very, very successful business. I guess one of the challenges in franchising is what level of service they're providing to those business owners for what remuneration, and that has come under pressure recently. So you're seeing question marks with some of the franchises about the value that they're offering, and then you're starting to see a proliferation of new boutique independents, people like One Agency or Agency HQ, those sorts of people who you can be John Pidgeon Real Estate powered by a back end. So I guess starting in 2026, a little bit of each of those, with the key people having some skin in the game. Yeah. But I think also, and we might touch on it, the ecosystem we'll touch on it a little later, the ecosystem needs to, I guess, become more contemporary when it gets to information and technology and
I guess that needs to evolve a little bit as well.
Archaic still.
So your strength is, I guess, is people leadership, would you say? And people, and real estate's definitely a people business. What would you say a high-performing culture actually looks like?
Again, extraordinarily lucky to walk into the industry, into a business like McGrath, which was, I guess, the bastion for high performance, courtesy of its founder. John revolutionised a lot of the things in real estate it must be almost 30 years ago. And that was really the benchmark for high performance. And high performance is about not being satisfied with what is being done. We did happen to have the vast majority of the best agents in the country, and that wasn't kind of by luck. It was by design. They came to an organisation where a lot was expected, and you'd perform that, and you'd be measured, and you'd be challenged to continue to do better next time, not just in economic sense, but also in level of customer service. And that was really what John was known for. He wanted the business to be seen as a profession rather than the reputation that it may have perhaps had prior to that. And so it was about the customer experience as well, and always challenging how you can be better. So setting KPIs, setting targets, making sure that the team is calibrated toward those, building systems and processes to support them in doing that. That's high performance, continuous improvement.
Yeah. I guess as a spectator watching McGrath grow and always being in awe of how that brand grew, I always wondered, how does that, when you're growing to that level, how do you manage that and keep it systemized across such a big business? Like, how do you keep, like a founder like John, who's obviously so passionate about a certain size, how do you keep that standard so high when you're growing at that rate?
Yeah, it's a little bit like in growing so many businesses that I've worked with, rapid growth, you've got to get the core of it right first. And it's really tempting with a business and a founder to say, hey, we're here, we're doing something, we're going to go really far and wide, but you've got to get that right first. Now, I had the benefit of walking into that business after a lot of that hard work was done, 8 or 9 offices, and the processes were there. They needed some more improvement and investment, but that's what you've got to do, and you've got to resist the temptation to say, hey, Australia-wide, we're coming there. You get it right there first, and then you can scale. It's also about saying no, Rach. I mean, a lot of people wanted to come, and it's about those that you say no to, and it makes it more attractive as well. And that's the process by which the best people end up coming.
You mentioned about the IPO, I think it was 2015. With that comes public scrutiny and everything else. What did that teach you about, I suppose, resilience and communication? Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Residential property in Australia is like, it's more than an interest or a pastime. It's almost a national sport, isn't it? Yeah.
We're so passionate about it, and we all know so much about it, supposedly.
And John had such a presence, didn't he?
Yeah.
Big profile.
Yeah.
And we obviously leveraged that to our benefit. And so then whenever you're doing something just with a business like that, the media are all over it and they're interested in it. But then that's exacerbated when you go and become a public listed company as well. So I guess I've always been a relatively good communicator, and I prefer to get on the front foot and be a proactive communicator. So that served us well. In that business and in that evolution of the company, it was important to have good, strong relationships with the media and with the particular journalists. And, sometimes things don't go right or as you plan. So I always like to get in front of them and say, hey, listen, this is the plan and this is why. And if you don't quite make that, you get in front of them proactively and say, look, we tried to do that, but this happened and we're here. They respect that, rather than them coming knocking on the door saying, hey, what happened here?
So you weren't the Wayne Bennett of the real estate industry.
No, and that was really, really important. I think they appreciated that, and those relationships remain. But it's also, that's external communication. We had a rapidly growing team from 100-odd people to 1,800 people, and it's important to keep your communication with them up as well as to what your strategy is, what your objectives are, where you're going, where we're going to move to next. And so you can never really over-communicate.
Good point.
Yeah. What would you say your biggest internal shift was that you had to manage through that time?
You had to try and stay, ahead of the game all of the time. In previous businesses, there wasn't that media scrutiny. Also, I suppose, technology was starting to come to the fore as well. And so you needed to stay ahead of that as well. Do a lot of listening, do a lot of learning on the fly, on the job as well, to try and stay ahead of the game. I always try and adopt kind of like second mover advantage rather than first mover advantage. Let someone else go and test and try and perhaps fail and then learn from that. So that was challenging as well, adoption of the right technology.
If someone owned a real estate business listening in to your expertise, what leadership change would they or should they make tomorrow, do you think?
Tomorrow. The big general question there, John.
A very generalised question.
And I'll go more general, maybe not even just in real estate, but perhaps exacerbated by the nature of real estate. It's about making sure that you take a breath and have some down or quiet time to ensure what your original objective was. So in real estate, it's a sales-driven business. You're on 24/7 or maybe 6, and you're very, very busy, and you've got teams of people that are very, very busy, lots of opportunities coming at you. And sometimes you can get distracted in that and forget what the actual goal was. So my advice always to leadership teams, stakeholders or owners or business owners is make sure you allocate the time, that downtime, to stop, have a breath, think about what the objective actually was and check that you're calibrated toward that. Because you might be going way, way off path, feeling good, but way off path where you really started out aiming at.
Yeah, love that. That downtime definitely helps, that doesn't it? All right, we're going to take a break and we're going to get what Geoff predicts the future is going to be in the Australian property market.
This is Property is brought to you by Sphere Home Loans. Sphere Home Loans is a mortgage broker that helps our listeners all around Australia. So, if you want to get into your first home sooner, looking at upgrading, an additional property, or want your current mortgage reviewed, just search Sphere Home Loans or click the link in the show notes, and their dedicated brokers will be able to help you wherever you are. If you are, however, after personal financial advice, don't get it from a podcast. If you would like help based on your own personal situation, head over to moneypodcast.com.au, click Get Help, and we'd be happy to introduce you to one of our trusted professionals. That's moneypodcast.com.au and click Get Help.
All right, we're back. Geoff, what's your read on today's property market? What's happening? And when I shouldn't say property market, I should say property markets. What are you reading out there? Because I know you're still an avid follower of the industry.
Yeah, it's quite bullish at the moment, isn't it? We've just had the most recent data out from Cotality, formerly CoreLogic, and that will show you, if you annualise. I always like to annualise the most recent quarter. So you've got 3 months of information there and annualising. So you're looking kind of forward with the current trend rather than historical 12-month-old data. That'll tell us that nationally, we've got an annualised rate of price growth of about 12.5%. That's extremely strong.
Massive, isn't it?
Extremely bullish. And that's probably a little bit of a hangover from the 3 interest rate cuts that we had and the commensurate increase in consumer sentiment. Probably also the tax cuts that were delivered some time ago, all feeding into liquidity and demand, exacerbated by supply and demand as well. And so extremely strong price growth in the national market. Now, if it's 12.5% average across the country, you're going to have outliers there. So you've probably got a range of some markets doing 1%. And some doing, you ready, up to 29%, which is Perth at the moment.
Wow.
It's become even more resilient and robust in Perth. So that's extremely strong. What would we expect? Most recently we've seen the spectre of inflation raising its head again. And so as a consequence of that, we've moved from an expectation of ongoing interest rate cuts to possible stagnation for 3, 6, maybe 12 months, midterm, and even now the possibility of 1, maybe even 2 increases next year. I know, Rachel. during 2026 should inflation persist. So all of those factors together, and we might touch on unemployment a little bit later as well, all of those factors together suggest to me that what we're seeing at the moment, that quarterly annualised 12.5, in the next couple of months you'll see that start to steady down. I don't think 12.5% nationally is a very healthy thing. No. I think it's got to be single digits, less than that. And that's probably where we're headed, I think.
Yeah. Well, with that in mind, what are you forecasting in the next 12 to 24 months in the property market or markets?
12 to 24 months over the entire nation. Well, certainly starting off with that for 2026, coming off that rate of extreme growth that we're seeing at the moment, and being more steady, single digits, probably national in the vicinity 2026, somewhere between 6 and 9% nationally. A very good report out recently by Louis Christopher at SQM, his boom and bust report. Thoroughly recommend people that are passionate about property market to have a read of that. And that's circa what he's suggesting as well. But within that, as we said before, so many variables, markets within markets, and different things happening, different levels of infrastructure investment, different impacts on employment, etc.
If you're an investor listening in now, wanting to get the next hotspot, or just getting a read on the market, I suppose, what would be your indicators? What are you tracking? Is it inflation? Is it unemployment? Is it like days on market? Is it like annualized growth? What are your key factors in your mind?
Population growth in a particular region needs to be, that's number one, because that drives demand and supply, right? And supply has been historically constrained, and we don't really see any immediate solutions to that. So really, if you're looking at specific regions, it's the population growth, the infrastructure investment, and consequently from that comes employment. So they're the areas that you would be looking at.
Do you think we're underestimating just how tight supply actually is right now?
Yeah, I mean, that all comes from the extreme rates of immigration, right? And the report that I alluded to before from Louis Christopher, there's an interesting section in there on population. Yes, perhaps we do underestimate that at the moment, but there's a little snippet of perhaps light approaching where most recent construction approvals on a quarterly basis, if you annualise them, suggests that if immigration comes off from our circa 430,000 net at the moment, perhaps down toward 390,000, when you annualise construction starts for 2026, we're actually, believe it or not, headed to a position where we might be in a position of surplus for 2026, 30,000 homes, perhaps. So a little possibility of some light at the end of the tunnel there if we can get those numbers right. So, yeah, very, very tight at the moment. Perhaps some improvement coming very slowly in 2026. But for the foreseeable future, demand will continue to exceed supply and therefore robust prices.
Interesting you say that. Housing approvals today down 6%. So I don't know what your take on the government's lame attempt to create more supply, but they're not reaching the targets that they want or promised.
Well, that was a very bullish target, right? 5 years and 1.2 million homes. And so, no, certainly lagging that. And really, you've got to look at immigration. I understand. I'm a proponent of the big Australia, and there's great reasons for that. Perhaps we just need to be a little bit more circumspect there. And the crisis in rentals at the moment is terrible as well. Terrible from a renter's perspective, terrific from a landlord's perspective.
So, showing our age in the room, my first investment was 1999. No internet. Very little data on which to gather your thoughts on where you should be buying and what you should be buying. Fast forward to 2025, Rach, heading into 26 pretty soon. Buyers are more informed than ever. Are they overwhelmed?
Yeah, and this is where the human value add comes from buyers agents and selling agents, because you can be overwhelmed by the sheer volume of data there, depending on where your feed is and how you set that all up. So absolutely. But that's where I guess the savvy and patient buyers and selling agents spend the time with those people to educate them and I guess refine their parameters of search and what they're really looking for.
Do you think that transparency in the industry has improved as a result of all this data that we have available to us?
Yeah, transparency in the industry has been a hot topic in the media, hasn't it, of recent times?
Do you mean honesty?
I was going to say transparency, but sure.
We are going to talk about the myth, aren't we? A little, yeah. I think availability of information has obviously increased dramatically. There are fundamental structural problems with the way the industry is in terms of transparency, and that's creating issues of buyers often feeling that they're not having access to all of the information and perhaps being misled. And therefore some of the government initiatives now you're seeing starting to come to the fore. So I think there's some structural issues with the industry and the ecosystem because it's been built to the way the world used to be and it really hasn't updated. I think there's some opportunities there into the future.
Yeah, well, I'm keen to ask you a little bit about that, but let's talk about that myth. What do you think, if there's one myth out there for buyers or maybe sellers, what would it be that needs to be squashed?
Well, I reckon one of the greatest myths at the moment, and people might say I'm biased because I've worked in the industry for the last 15 years and a lot of my friends and associates are real estate agents, but I think one of the greatest myths at the moment is that the selling agent is at the heart of the problems of the industry and are to blame for a lot of the issues. I disagree with that. The vast majority of real estate agents are doing a great job servicing their customers' needs. I think the flaw is the actual system. I think that's the problem.
As in the system, the process that they go through to get the result?
Yes, both that in terms of the ecosystem, but also the transparency of information available to buyer and seller. If somehow we can have an ecosystem that serves that information up so everybody is on a level playing field, then you're not going to get the issues around underquoting or overquoting, et cetera, at the moment. And so I alluded to it before, and I think that's a result of the ecosystem, the property ecosystem being built decades ago, and now you've got a plethora of information, and now you've got buyers and sellers feeling they don't have the same access. And I think if in the future we can build a more contemporary ecosystem where that is taken out of the equation, inequality of access to information, you're then going to get agents doing what they should be doing in providing service and great results and negotiation rather than all of the other things. And then I think that myth will probably be exposed that it's not the agents, it's the system. And through my business, I've actually been lucky enough to work with a bunch of people who are looking at that, and that's one of the businesses that I'm currently advising, at how we can improve that ecosystem and bring it forward into a more contemporary system.
Can we hear a little bit more about that business?
We might do that at a subsequent podcast, perhaps, Rach?
Yeah. Just on that, is part of that what you're saying our fault as a consumer because we're emotionally wrapped up in Australian real estate? I don't know, I'll use a bad example. I go to a car yard and I see this I see this car that I want and it's got $15,000 on its head. I can barter down to 13 or I can pay 15, right? But the price is there for everyone to see. Is it worth 15? Wouldn't have a clue. You could apply the same theory to real estate, could you not? It's just that there's other people wanting to buy that thing at the same time.
Yeah. It's always fascinated me. You know, I talked about demand and supply before. And the Australian passion for homes, I love that. I love working in this industry. It's the asset class is fabulous. But so there's a demand and supply issue, but it's always fascinated me that the current ecosystem serves us up only a portion of the homes that are out there at a time when we're looking to buy. For example, if you went to buy in, I don't know, Berkeley Vale, the market will say, no problems, John. Squint real hard and look through here, and we've got three properties for you, John.
Yeah.
You know there's 1,500 or 1,800 in that marketplace.
Yeah.
And so as a consequence of that, there's this log jam of, and those that are out there that don't really want to come to market at the moment because of all of the friction and cost, etc., they may too be interested. So maybe somewhere in there's a solution.
Yeah, so if the system was more accessible for everyone, then everyone can play by the rules.
Yeah, and I think, the evolution of the portals, that happened some 30 years ago, and they really haven't changed. That was a major shift in the ecosystem, major shift. And they built, REA has built tremendous business. But perhaps it's time for the next fundamental shift to start to occur, brought on by technology, brought on by AI, etc.
And you're saying, watch this space.
But I think people, when they're buying their first home, when they're dealing with a real estate agent for the first time, and they may not know the rules of the game as much as some people do, it is really important to know that real estate agent is doing their job by representing the owner, and their job is to get them the best price that they can in the market. I feel like you see that same client a few years later when they're selling their first home and they've kind of understood the rules of the game. They want that agent to protect their interest when they're selling. So I feel like it's just time in market, and those new buyers coming in may not have the knowledge of somebody who sold a property for the first time.
Well, you have that, Rach, but you also have, when you work in the industry, and real estate agents are doing this multiple times per day, per week, etc., and they're very familiar with it. But as homeowners, we don't actually do it very often. The hold period for Australian residential property is an extraordinarily long period of time. The world, the market, the tools, the system, the processes, technology move on. And so anybody coming to market really isn't really familiar with the processes, etc. So it's not just the first home buyers. That's the job of the agent to understand that. It's the job of the auctioneer to understand that that poor person standing there doesn't know what the hell's going on because they haven't done it for 10 years.
Yeah.
You've been obviously a highly effective leader throughout the journey, and no doubt in those sort of roles, a lot of pressure comes with it, stress, sleepless nights, those sort of things. How do you handle yourself from a personal point of view? Is it health and fitness? Is it eating well? Is it getting the right sleep? Because a lot of people just can't handle the pressure in those high position roles over a long period of time, and you've obviously done that. So on a personal level, what do you think your attributes are to maintain that? Yeah,
so I've always liked to try and keep healthy, eat well, exercise. And as a consequence of having busy jobs, when when are you going to exercise? Exercise really early in the morning. And so I've always done that. And I guess my tendency was toward kind of longer endurance type training things, bike rides, Ironmans, etc. The marathons, those things teach you resilience. They teach you, when your body's trying to tell you that I've got to stop, they teach you that, no, you can do so much more. I apply that to business every single day, challenging and knowing that you can always do more than what the norm is. I've found that a great discipline. I've found, just trying to be healthy, having activity, whether that's a dopamine hit or whatever it is, it gives you the energy to continue to do that. And when you're leading organisations, 1,000 or 2,000 people, you need that. You need to be on all of the time because they buy your energy. Yeah. And if you're flat, those 2,000 people are going to be flat. So they're investing in you. So I've always tried to have that discipline. And still, I set the alarm for, I don't know, whatever it is these days, 4:40 a.m. To go off and do my daily activity.
No one bothers you at that
John's time.
Yeah, well, there you go.
And you feel as if you're getting a jump start on the rest of them, don't you?
Yeah,
when you're creeping around in the middle of the night,
the old saying, win the morning, win the day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you've obviously got an incredible insight into the real estate market, and I've asked you about what's going to happen in the next year. And with all this technology, and AI is a huge thing that everyone's talking about at the moment, what does the real estate market look like in 2030 if we can go that far?
It's getting disrupted by the sounds of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Look, I've spoken a little bit about the structural nature of the business, whether it's franchise and company owned, etc. I think the large successful franchise businesses will remain. I think the proliferation of AI is really interesting, and I love technology and embracing all of that. I think the role of the agent will gradually change. And I spoke about that before. The primary role at the moment, the most value add from a human at the moment is that point of negotiation. And so I think we're going to start to see some of the other peripheral activities. I'm not necessarily talking robots that open for inspections, although they are only $20,000 per robot to come and do your cleaning, etc. Make your meals. Fascinating, isn't it?
It is.
Amazing.
I'm not suggesting that, but the extensive role of a real estate agent will probably start to narrow in and focus more on that negotiation point. So I see that occurring more and more in coming years.
In your time, you may not have seen too many like buyer's agents were probably just starting to come through, and now you can get a buyer's agent certificate on the back of a Wheaties packet. Now you've got vendor advocacies. What are your thoughts on if you were an agent back in the day trying to transact real estate for the vendor? What are your thoughts on both buyers agents and vendor advocacy? So it sounds as though they're here to stay.
Yeah, look, like anything, I suppose, we as human beings kind of flock toward things, don't we? And we sometimes flock too far, and then we've got to come back again. So I think with buyers agencies, and you're right, Simon Cohen was probably one of the pioneers of that industry and has gone on to do very, very well. Lots of people think it looks terrific, don't they? And so they flock to it, and then you're going to have a period of settling and people becoming disgruntled with poor service perhaps, some people not doing enough business, and then they flitter away from it. So they're here to stay definitely, but I think from the large increase in numbers you'll see that start to settle down. The better people will succeed and the others will go off and do something else.
And on the vendor side?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? I find myself doing some of that gratis, because of my knowledge in the industry. Yes, but perhaps not such a proliferation as we've seen with buyers agents.
I got caught out the other day not knowing that vendor agents were a thing or vendor advocates were a thing. I thought that was a real estate agent. I thought that's what their job was. I've learnt so much in the last few months,
And do you know
John.
what? It's probably what I was speaking about before. We don't do it very often as vendors.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a statistic. People think that we sell our homes every 7 or 10 years. But if you look at the number of homes in Australia, 11.29 million, and we look at the number of sales that we're doing annualised, 534,000, if you do that mathematics, the average is about 22 years. That's not very frequent.
No, it's not.
And therein lies a whole lot of other issues. But so when we come to do that transaction, we probably need some help.
Yeah.
Because all the agents are telling you how wonderful they are and you should pick me.
Yeah.
But you probably need some guidance.
Ethical assistance, I think they call it. Yeah, he can tell he's a numbers man. He's come from an accountancy background.
Absolutely. Now, we have a lot of listeners that will be tuning in, and it would be remiss of me not to ask somebody with the insider knowledge that you have, what is the best piece of property advice or real estate advice that you've ever received?
Property's a long-term game. You spoke before, John, about when you bought your first property. I'm not going to tell you the year that I bought mine, but it was a house in Leichhardt for $198,000.
I bet you performed better than my first one.
I'm not sure. I love Leichhardt in Sydney. It's a long-term game, Rach. Now, what we've seen is some spectacular periods of growth. Don't expect that goes on forever. Don't think it's a get-rich-quick scheme. And I know, we've also seen a proliferation of social media, and it all looks terrific, right? Just like the European holidays. Everybody's over there, but they're not. that rate of growth isn't available to everybody. It's not a get-rich scheme. Treat it as a long-term investment. You're not going to be turning them over frequently. Pay principal on your principal place of residence, and don't expect those spectacular capital gains long-term.
That's great advice.
Very good advice, yeah. GPL Advisory, we spoke about that at the start of the show. What's happening for you in that space moving forward?
Yeah, so, obviously there's a number of people. I've been in the real estate industry for the last 15 years, so focused on growth businesses in that sector, but also because I've been in a range of different industries, I also have some people that are looking for growth and guidance there. So they're the sorts of activities that I do when people, not startups, but when people have a business and they get to a level and they want some advice on where they should go to next, how they should structure that, or they want accountability, or they want help with a strategic plan and accountability on execution of that. They're the sorts of things that we do. I did say not necessarily startups, save for the one that I alluded to before. That's a residential property. It's technology. It's rapid growth. That's a really interesting one that we're involved in as well. So small number of clients, but drawing on my skills of the pitfalls of growing a business, the lessons that I've learned, and I guess the wisdom that I can impart on growing businesses, because people are busy out there in their businesses and they just want, I guess, the benefit of some wrinkles and some grey hair to know what to avoid or look for.
That's great. Do you sit on any boards?
Yeah, I do a couple of boards. You've got to be really, really careful with those, obligations or responsibilities versus benefits of doing those things.
Yeah.
But it's great when a group of people or an organisation wants to learn. You don't want to be on a board just because that would look good or he can bring some transactions.
Yeah.
Not interested in that. If you want to learn and you want to grow and you want the benefit of some wisdom, they're the sorts of boards I'm interested in.
I'm doing my board directors course next week, Rach, so I might call upon Geoff for some insights.
That's a wonderful course, that. I recommend that to everybody. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thought you were going to be laying on the beach when you said where you were going.
No, well, maybe. I don't think I'll get time, to be honest, but yeah. Geoff, thanks for coming on. Really enjoyed our conversation. What insights this guy's got in the real estate industry, huh?
Absolutely.
So appreciate it. We must get you back on at some stage into the future by the sounds of it in this tech space. I think there's some interesting things happening and I think it's an industry that definitely needs some sort of disrupting. Don't know how it's going to happen, but it definitely needs it.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk and look forward to coming back at some point in the future.
I feel we're going to hear a few things.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Well, if you enjoyed this episode, hit a follow, share it with a mate, and generally give us some feedback, good, bad or otherwise. We'll catch you next week.
Any information given in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and you should seek your own property advice before acting on anything you may hear in this podcast. If you want to start or advance your property education journey, John Pidgeon's book, Sort Your Property Out and Build Your Future, is available where all good books are sold, or via the link in the podcast show notes. Opinions or comments from any guests on the podcast are theirs and not those of the hosts, the publisher, or their respective license holders.